Hello everyone, welcome back to the last episode of this Johnsbow N1 build. I'm not exactly sure how much work is left, but by saying this is the last episode, I'm forcing myself to finish it in this one episode. So if it's a really long video, that's because there's way more stuff to do than I thought there would be. But welcome back, and the first thing I'm going to do is finish off all the stuff to do with the case and the layout, so then we can get on with the wiring. And the first thing we're going to do is the feet. So last time I put the case on these big fat brass legs, a bit too weird, I think, aesthetics wise. So I have raided my scrap bin for some slightly shorter brass pieces. I've got 4 of these, and that's going to look like this, which I think still has the same kind of funky 60s brutalist vibe, but it's a bit less, out there. It doesn't add quite so much height to the case, keeps the volume nice and small, and yeah, that's what we're going to go with. So I'm just bolting these in with these M5 screws and one of those grippy nuts on the other side. And what I've done here, because this leg covers up this screw hole, I've hopefully done this so that you can put that in first, then put that through, and then you can rotate that to access the screw. There we go. So when that's bolted in place, I can still turn this screw. There we go. So those are the feet done. And after we've polished these during the final assembly, we're going to make some little leather or cork or something, kind of pads on the bottom to cover these old screw holes that aren't really being used for anything, and just to make it a nice, softer thing to sit on your desk. Feet. Done. So next up, we want to put a logo on the back, or something here. We need a logo on the case and we need something here because this looks weird. And I have to say that one of the comments from Scott Hayton, you said cut out the Billet Labs logo here, and you are right, that's the best option we've got. However, the pump is directly behind it. And if there was a gap there, I agree, that would look really good and it would act as a vent. But with the pump there, it's going to be kind of cut down the middle because you're going to see the brass here and then the kind of black chrome or whatever that finish is on the bottom of the pump here. And I think that's going to kind of ruin that cool idea. So yeah, awesome idea, but I think I'm going to see how it looks instead, like cutting this out here as a circle and just bonding that on, because I think in this particular instance seeing through that is not going to look as good as having that as like a consistent logo. So we don't cut anything out and we have that copper logo over the top and you'll see the aluminium through it. I'm going to see how it looks. I'm still slightly concerned it'll look a bit too busy with all the different materials visible on the back, but yeah, like I said, we've got a few of these back plates we can cut up, so we're not really losing anything other than time by giving it a go and seeing how it looks. That was not the best tool for the job. I've managed to get quite an even angle on there for doing it by hand. I'm really happy with that. Let's see how it looks. I don't think I like it. Damn it! I don't know, I'm not actually sure that that is better than nothing. I don't know, maybe we consider somewhere else for this logo. No, that looks stupid. What I've made is a really nice logo that doesn't look good anywhere on the thing I want to put it on. So maybe we save that for something else. Right, I'll have a think about that. So the final thing I'm not super happy with is this little cutout here. We haven't neatened up the edges, and that will undoubtedly improve the look of it, but it's just a bit weak. We got two very long thin bits of only 1.5mm thick alley. The line isn't perfectly straight either, but I was planning to fix that anyway. But I'm wondering about cutting some kind of little surround to go around here. I've got some brass, in case you can't tell. I hate buying new material, so I've actually got these brass light switch plates. I buy lots of stuff at boot fairs and stuff. And if I kind of cut that out to run down the side of the motherboard, line up with the top and the bottom of the motherboard I/O, and then cut a bit out of that, it might neaten this up. Again, I'm going to spend an hour on something before knowing if it will look good, but I think it has some potential. So I've spent a bit of time playing around with this, and I think this has some potential to look good. The edges are obviously a bit rough, but the idea is to attach this to the alley plate and then file the edges down together so that we have a nice smooth kind of brass to aluminium transition there. I think we're going somewhere with this. I like it. I think we'll call that back panel done for now. I'm going to get on to mounting the drive. So we got this little Samsung 870 EVO 4TB drive, and we've left a nice bit of space for that to go under here. It doesn't quite fit, as with most things on this build, but it should still fit within the outer case, even though it overhangs this little lip here. So I'm going to cut away this little raised section here, just so it can sit flat on the bottom there, and then see what options we have for mounting it once it's sitting there. So remember, we also need to mount this corner of this radiator somehow, and there's a little screw that's accessible here because we cut away that bit of the fan, so we can access this screw hole directly. I think it's an M3. So I'm thinking I've got this little bit of aluminium plate, so I'm going to make a cut here, bend this bit up, and then that's going to act as the mount to the radiator, and then the rest of this will act as a mount to attach the drive to, and then it will all be bolted to the floor there. How's that looking? Oh, perfect. I shouldn't sound so surprised. That fits perfectly as expected, as I made it to. And there we have it, one of the most fiddly but completely unimpressive things of the build so far. So through here we put these two countersunk screws, then the drive mounts to the top through 3 holes like that, and then this bit will sit here, and these 2 holes go through the case, the bottom of the case, and can then be bolted through from underneath using a couple of nuts. And then with everything back together, you can see our nice little bracket there. And there is one more screw that's a bit fiddly to get in, and that just goes through the back of this bracket into the radiator. And it's done. Well, let's check it fits in the case still. If it doesn't, I think I'm going to cry. Okay. Mount SSD. Done. Okay, I'm going to try another time to make a logo. So I've got the rest of my brass plate here, and I've got our logo, which I've printed out and cut out, and I'm just going to trace it on here, and then hopefully we'll have like a floating brass logo in front of the aluminium. That's the plan anyway. Except Sharpies are terrible on metal. What pens do people use to write on metal? Let me know, I want to get some. Oh, it just soaks straight through. I've done it twice because the 2 parts of the logo are too close to cut in place like that, so I'll take the L from here and the rest of the B from this side. Right, I'm not going to attach these yet because I want to polish everything first, but this is the one. What do you reckon? Logo. Done. I'm going to do the wiring now. I love wiring. So the first thing we're going to do, the first issue that we need to tackle is that the 24-pin motherboard connector does not fit into the socket on the motherboard because this big brass thing is in the way. That is the socket for the cable. And this is just a little bit too close. So what I've done is I've bought a low profile one, and you can see the difference between the two there. So that should solve our problem. So I just need to, one at a time, de-pin all of these and attach this instead. This comes with some little crimps, little pins inside, but I think we're just going to reuse the original ones because why not? So I have disconnected one already here, and that is just going to go into there, but because the pins are slightly longer on here than the pins that come with this, you can see if that is in the normal distance, we're going to have a bit too much metal poking out the back. This already has some poking out, but just to neaten that up, and because it's going to be so close to a conductive piece of brass, I'm going to cut 24 or 23 because this pin is empty. Small pieces of heat shrink, just slide one over each time and then put it through. Right, let's see if our fresh new cable fits. So that's in there. I think we're going to have to do a bend. Remember, it's okay to bend things once. If I'm bending these back and forth all the time, the metal's going to work, harden and snap. But this is fine. I had to take the back panel off to access the power supply. And I've started wiring other bits in as well. We've got the 12 volt high power cable down there. That's looping up through this bunch of wires down to here. And you know, wiring isn't the most entertaining thing to watch, so I'm kind of just going to get on with this and update you at various points. Right, we're getting there. Got most of the major cables hooked up. Next thing I need to do is shorten this CPU power cable, because currently it is way too long. So I've just marked on here where I need to shorten it. So I'm going to chop this off, re-crimp these, and then reattach them to this plug. So that's our shortened CPU cable. And then I'm going to separate all the wires, and I will explain why I'm doing that in a minute. So with the pump, we've got this quite ugly yellow, blue and black wire. So I want to just put some heat shrink over that just to cover it up. But we've got this fan connector on the end, and the heat shrink I have doesn't fit over that. And any bigger heat shrink I buy, it's then going to be too big that it won't shrink over the wires. So I'm going to need to disconnect this fan connector. And I've not done this before, but I'm fairly sure you can just poke something small in there and push the little connectors out. Before that, I'm going to take a photo of it, because even though it's only 3 wires, I don't want to forget which wire goes where. So I don't have the exact tool for the job, but a tiny little flathead screwdriver should do it. Hey, there we go. Cool. So blue, yellow, black, that way up. Okay, I'm just going to check that still plugs in. Seems good to me. Okay, then we have one nice black sleeved pump wire. So that is everything wired. It's a bit of a mess, there's lots of things poking out all over the place. And what I'm thinking here is I'm going to do something that I haven't seen done before. I'm going to take a bit of inspiration from the automotive industry, and I'm going to join all these wires together in one single wiring loom. So places like here, you've got the CPU power cable, you've got a fan splitter coming around here. They all join up with the 24-pin cable. Wherever there are multiple cables joining or running alongside each other, I'm going to join them all together, first with some cable ties, and then I'm going to wrap the entire thing in loom tape. I've not seen anyone do this before. I had a quick Google, I couldn't find anything. I'm sure someone has done it, but I think that is going to neaten up a lot of this wiring. And that is the reason that I separated all the individual wires, so where there is a bunch of them, we can have them in a round cross-section rather than them all running alongside each other, which is going to be much more difficult to bundle together. So yeah, first thing I'm going to do is cable tie anywhere where there are multiple wires running alongside each other. Then I'm going to take the entire loom off and then wrap it with loom tape. Okay, so I'm done, but I've noticed here, bundling all these together into a circle means they don't fit down between here without putting a lot of outward force on here, which isn't good because that's going to be pulling the block away from the CPU. So I'm going to cut this, split this into two smaller bundles, and they'll both be running sort of one on top of the other like that. And I've run out of normal size cable ties, so I'm using these ones which will hold your car together. They sound so much better though. These will all be removed, if I didn't make that clear. All the cable ties will be removed when I tape everything. Hence why it doesn't matter that I'm using giant cable ties. Okay, so that's everything cable tied together, and now I need to take the entire wiring loom out, so that's probably going to mean disconnecting a few of these pipes, and yeah, we'll see what this looks like laid out on the table. And that is a wiring loom. Looks quite daunting, but that is every single cable to make the PC work. The only things we haven't included in here are the pump wire, and while it would have been possible to cut here and put a removable connector on, pumps do fail and we want it to be serviceable by the customer, and they come with this hardwired on, so we didn't like the idea of making that something that had to be customized if they ever wanted to replace it. We also haven't included the signal cable from the hard drive to the motherboard because that didn't overlap any other cables, that's just its own thing, as is the on and off switch. And here I've got my loom tape. Now this is not the same as electrical tape. You don't ever want to do this with electrical tape because it gets warm and it leaves sticky residue all over everything. This stuff does not leave residue. It's like a fabric based thing. And it sticks to itself much more than anything else. So it is. This is the same stuff they use, as I mentioned, to wrap looms in cars. So they sit in a hot engine bay for decades, and it's still fine. So that's what I'm using. I'm just going to very slowly start with the smallest bits, work my way towards the bigger bits, and yeah, I've not done this before, but how hard can it be? And I'm just taking off the cable ties as I go. Obviously we haven't tested this loom yet, so if we do have a dodgy wire somewhere, I am very conscious of the fact I'm going to have to do this all again, but you know, that's just something we've got to deal with. So I've reached the end of the first uninterrupted section, so I'm just going to loop this over itself a few times. And then here for the first time we have 2 bits joining, so I'm just going to go from this small one and then start wrapping over the big one as well, and then I'll probably go back down here with the same piece. Like, you want to use as few individual sections of this as possible, just because it's going to naturally be stronger if it's one piece. And there we go. I'm quite happy with that. I mean, wires are never going to look beautiful, but I think that is as good as we could get it to look with the sort of build that we're doing. And here it is with the loom installed. It was quite tricky to manipulate everything into place, but it's now all nice and solidly held in there. A couple of things I've learnt from doing this for the first time, and if you're planning to do this, pay attention to the angle that the wires need to separate at, because there were some places like here where I'd wrapped it around and these wires wanted to go the same way, and it took quite a lot of force to bend them out the way. And the same thing where you've just got bends here, because I held these all in place and then just wrapped it up, but I wasn't really paying attention to this right angle bend. So there's a lot of strength in it when you have 20 or 30 wires in one bundle. So it did take a while to kind of slowly bend those into a right angle to get it in there. But I'm happy with that. It's looking good, I think. Wiring. Done. So the next thing now is to basically assemble the PC with the customer's parts. However, I am off to Italy for 2 weeks. So we're going to have to wait till I'm back. Yeah, see you in 2 weeks. I'm back in England with my cup of tea. Oh yeah. Right, let's put this PC together. So first thing we're going to do is, well, what we need to do is basically go through every single component one by one and finish them to the quality of the finished product. So we're going to start with the case. It's picked up a lot of scratches over the last few months. So I'm going to sand those out and then polish the whole thing. I've been thinking about what finish we want on here. And I don't think we want a full like mirror polished finish, because it's going to be a fingerprint magnet and a scratch magnet, and it will very quickly not look that great anymore. So I'm thinking of doing like a brushed effect, kind of like a DeLorean. So yeah, I'll get all the marks out first and then we'll see how that looks.
Wear a mask.
Right, so there we have it. Got a nice brushed finish all over it. Nice and consistent. And it just means that if the customer ever wants to, we can just supply them a bit of Scotch-Brite and they can just refinish it like that. So onto the underneath and the feet. And then with the feet, we're going to be making some little laser cut pads to go on the bottom. And obviously the other side is not visible, so we just need to finish the edges. And brass, just like copper, oxidizes as soon as you touch it with your bare skin. So rather than wearing gloves, I'm just going to make sure to not touch the edge once it's finished. The screws go in there first. Oh no, I've lost a screw. Ah, balls. Found it. For now, that's good. That's the outer case done. So we're going to do the front and rear panels now, and that's just going to be more of the same, but I need to disassemble this. And while all the aluminium is going to be brushed, we're going to keep the copper bits polished, as in shiny polished, not brush polished.
Wear a mask.
Oh, that's better, isn't it? Shiny. I think these need a bit of smoothing down before polishing. Shiny. So I've got a little thing I need to figure out here. If you look at these copper pieces, they're obviously much bigger than the studs here, so they're kind of free to move around. And previously during the assembly, I've just like manually positioned them onto the edge. So the curve is concentric with the outer curve here. But as this is the final assembly, we want to attach them a bit more permanently than that. So I'm going to position them all. And then I think it doesn't need to be strong at all, because once it's bolted together, there's no force on any of these pieces. So I think I will just put a little blob of epoxy on the inside of each one, just touching the copper. And then once this is bolted to here, there's no way they can move anyway. And then I'm just going to use a toothpick to kind of push the epoxy out so it's touching the edge of each of these pieces. And that should do it. I'll just give that a few minutes to cure. Okay, and then let's pop this back together. Nice. And with the front on, oh, I need to clean that bit up a bit. I'll do that off camera, you already know what it looks like. It's looking good. I really like the finish. Polishing. Done. So with the outside of the case done, we now need to fully disassemble every single component here. All the pipes are going to need properly cleaning on the inside and repolishing on the outside. The block's going to need polishing. We need to swap all the parts out for our new parts. Oh shit. Didn't empty my radiator properly. Got a bit of water on the power button, but by the time we turn that on, that'll be very dry. So here is every single component that's going into our PC. We've got our old test motherboard over there, but we're swapping that for this Z790i here. We got our drives, we got our RAM, we got our chip. We'll see how that lasts. We got our plumbing over here, and then yeah, the many small custom bits, radiators, fans, all the parts of the case and the block, the pump, etc, etc. So one at a time, we're going to finish these pieces and add them to the build. And it probably makes sense to start with the base of the case, which is here. So we've drilled a lot of holes here, there's a lot of bare metal on show, so I'm just going to neaten this up with some sandpaper and then just spray paint black over any areas that are not black. I'm going to do the same for this piece, which is the mount for the SSD, just because we want it to just blend in with the background, because you'll be able to see this through the vents in the side of the case, and we want the focus to be the case, not other bits of aluminium inside it. So we're going to paint these two black. At the same time, this radiator has a few chips that it's picked up, so I'm just going to smooth those down and give them a little extra coat of paint as well. So I need to go buy some paint. So I have my matte black metal paint with primer. So I don't need to prime any of this. I've masked up the radiator where I don't want the paint to go. I've prepped the surfaces of everything, I've neatened up this, and yeah, anyone who feels bad for this carpet is going to feel even worse for this carpet because I'm not even covering it. Hey, painting's gone well. Everything is looking nice and unobtrusive. So next up is this wooden spine, and the edges aren't very neat. There's a few burrs around here where it's been cut. So I'm going to sand over the edges and then stain this black as well. So I'm not doing this the way that it says to on the tin. This is one of those paint-on wood stains that you're going to use a brush for. But I've used a few of these in the past and you get quite noticeable brush marks. So I'm just dabbing it on with a rag, and I'm just going to slowly build up the finish because it doesn't make a thick, solid black layer, but with a few coats it will. I just don't want to end up with lines in it from the brush. And it's water-based, so it dries in about 5 or 10 minutes, this thin. So I'm just going to keep working my way through various coats, and hopefully it will look black at the end but still like wood. So this is after about 3 coats. This is definitely not the right stuff. I shouldn't have used this wood stain. I think what I needed was a wood dye, but I've committed and I've made it look good, I think. I'm not going to keep going. I quite like this kind of very dark brown rather than the black. It looks black most of the time, but you can still see the wood grain through it. Wood stain done. Then next up is going to be the monoblock backplate, which is going to sit in here. And even though this will be completely hidden and out of sight, I am going to polish it because I don't really know why, but I'm going to do it anyway. There we go, nice and shiny. I think it's looking nice. And then next up is going to be this back panel. So I'm going to take this apart, finish both these pieces with the same brushed finish that's on the case, and then I'll do the same for this handle on the back and the little B logo, and then we're going to glue that to here. So I've got the logo laid out where I want it, and my plan is just to take one piece off at a time, glue it, put it back on, and that way I'll keep the position that it's in. Yes. Go well, please. Yes. Just realised I've actually not sanded down the edge of that B. So there's some saw marks on there. That's the kind of charm that you get with a hand-built computer. Now we're going to add this back on, but before I do that, I'm going to finish the screws as well, because they are a bit discoloured. I'll just show you the difference. So I've just run this right one on the polishing wheel. Maybe you can't see because of the sun, but it's just going to blend in more nicely with this. And obviously we will be aligning the heads of these screws, because we're not savages. Then to put this on, it needs to be attached to the rest of the case, so let's do that. So I've just sanded the heads of these screws as well. And then these two little screws in the bottom, they used to be black, but again I've sanded off the black just so it matches a bit better. It's coming together, guys. And next up we are going to tackle the motherboard, and I'm not sure how big of a job this will be, because on our Z690i, the test board, we had to chop off the top of the VRM heatsinks. So I've looked at this and it looks about the same size. It looks to have about the same size heatsink as on the 690. So it's probably going to be a similar job. Oh God. I missed the motherboard, luckily. So this is the 690 and that's the 790. So you can see here we have cut off the top of the heatsink. It only becomes an issue if the heat pipe, you see that silver pipe in there, that takes the heat from the heatsink. Oh, sorry, that brings the heat to the heatsink. But that's well below, and the same on there, that's well below where the monoblock inlet and outlet pipes go. So we're just going to have to chop this probably 2 or 3 fins down just to clear that. And this is a very over-engineered motherboard, so that will cause no noticeable difference, or no harm. You might be able to notice the difference in the VRM temperatures by removing that part of the heatsink, but it's still more than sufficient to cool the VRMs. Now what I need to figure out is how to take this heatsink off. And it looks like it is one piece with that heat pipe, or at least I won't be able to remove it without removing the heat pipe. There's one screw here, there's one screw here, and from memory the other board was just 4 screws, but I can't remember if I had to take this enclosure off. But we'll find out. I can see the 4 screws which actually hold the heatsink in, so I'll do them first and then see where we're at. Okay, that is loose now, but wobbling that directly wobbles this, so I think this whole thing needs to come off as well. Things are loose. Okay, what is going on here? There's some tiny little fan cables, which I'm very scared of. I think you can see them on either side there. With there, I'll try taking these off. Okay, that hasn't really helped. Okay, I can take off one of these fans. Okay, after a bit more investigation, I've discovered that this sucks. This is going to be so difficult because, okay, unlike on the previous motherboard that we modified, this heat pipe that comes around here is like properly bonded into a channel, and I've tried kind of applying pressure here to try and waggle it out, and the heat pipe bent before anything happened. Only a tiny bit, so it's not going to affect the functionality or anything. But what it does mean is I need to, this entire piece, which was here, I've taken the fan off this end, but this whole piece can't really be disassembled anymore without risking quite permanent damage to the board. So I'll take out this tiny little delicate socket. There we go. So I need to chop off here all the way along without damaging anything else. So I think I'll wrap this in a bag and masking tape over it maybe. Please do not judge the general quality of my work by this. The blade has wandered up, so I'm cutting through a fin rather than through the gaps. So I'm going to file this flat, then I can get the saw in at the lower angle, which should make this a lot easier. Nice! So that's what I've taken off, and that is what we've got left. I don't know why I undid that from the vise, because I need to file it flat now anyway. So I'm just taking off any sharp edges and putting a tiny little chamfer on each edge. And the plan is to paint this black, so I'm just going to smooth it down very slightly with some sandpaper, and then it should be good to paint. And that's what we've got. Okay, and that is done. You can see I've bent it because this heat pipe is just copper, it's so weak, but because there are 4 mounting points, the mounting of that to the board will straighten it out, so that shouldn't be a problem. And we need to put it all back together now, but before we do, a couple of the thermal pads have got some aluminium shavings on them just from cutting, and we definitely don't want those little shavings anywhere near the motherboard. So we're going to replace those. And we've got some Billet pads here. I'm just going to cut a couple of strips. And these should be easily as good as the pads that were on there before. Now these 2 screws are squashing the new thermal pads, so I'm going to do them slightly tight, then just give it a minute for the pad to kind of naturally squish, then I'll give them a final crank at the end. Right, and that's our motherboard done, ready for installation. Customized motherboard. Done. So before we attach our motherboard to our case, we just need to think in terms of order of operations, and attaching this motherboard here will cover up the screw holes to mount the radiators and fans. So before doing that, we need to mount the radiators and the fans. Okay, fans and radiators are in. There's a bit of movement on this end of the radiators, but that then gets held together by that little copper piece that joins these two. So that will kind of add a bit of rigidity. And now we can attach the motherboard. But before that, we should install our drives and our RAM. So let's see what we've got. We have a Crucial T700 4TB, 12,400 megabytes per second drive. And then for the second drive, we have a WD Black 4TB drive, only 7,300 megabytes per second, this one. 32 gigabytes of 7200 megahertz Corsair Vengeance DDR5 RAM. And it should be fairly simple to install the drives. They sit one on top of the other here with a heatsink in between. But I'm still just going to double check the instruction manual for the motherboard just to check I'm not doing anything wrong. And I'm glad I checked because one of the slots for the drives is Gen 5 and the other is Gen 4. And this is Gen 4 and this is Gen 5. So we just need to make sure the right one goes in the right one. They're both in, they're looking nice and squished between those thermal pads. Lovely. Now we can attach this to the case. I'm not going to put the CPU in yet because I want that to have as little time as possible out in the open. So when we're ready to mount the block, we can take this cover off, put the chip on and just do that all in one go. And then our monoblock standoffs just screw onto here, but we need some washers first over each of these studs. Now we're going to mount the SSD, so that just bolts onto here. So we put these screws into here, then this sits on here, and then that goes through there. Lovely. It's looking nice and subtle and black so far. I think while we're over here we can add the power button. So the next thing we need to do is add this aftermarket contact frame, which is going to replace the original Intel mount there. These are proven to be much better, and especially on our monoblock, which has a flat cold plate. These make a massive difference. With our own testing against an EK water block, maybe a year or so ago, we beat EK by 3 degrees. And then in Gamers Nexus's testing, we lost to AlphaCool by something like 20 degrees. And that is because the original mounting hardware applies all the pressure here and here, which basically folds the chip in like that, in kind of like a V shape. So all the pressure from a flat cold plate is then applied to the corners, and we're not cooling the middle properly. Whereas this applies pressure all the way around, it makes it very flat, and it's just going to give us much, much better temperatures. So we need to take this off and put this on. And I need to make sure it goes on the correct way round, which is that way. There's a little arrow in this corner, which is mirrored on this little arrow here. You might not be able to see because of the reflection, but it's that way round. And it should just be as simple as unscrewing this. There's a lot of spring tension in it, so I'm going to go slowly. I should probably take that off, to be honest, so it's not under tension all the time. There we go. And I should probably put the CPU in now as well, because this little safety cover thing won't fit with this contact frame, so it's probably safer having the chip in there, even though it's going to be exposed. And there it is, currently the world's most unreliable chip. But the customer is aware of all the issues with the 14900K, and they want it anyway. So we are now at the point of installing the block. Now, because we've had some water running through here, I just want to take it apart and see what it looks like inside. I'm only going to take the bottom off. If this looks fine, then the rest will be fine as well. And we're going to be flushing some distilled water through it for a while to clean out anything that is in there, but hopefully there's nothing in there. Yeah, that's fine. So we need to make the block look nice now. So there's going to be a lot of polishing on here, but before that, I'm just going to resurface this because it's picked up a few little scratches and some patination. So I've got some 2500 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to work around in circles and just clean off the top layer. We finished this properly before, so there shouldn't be any deep scratches or anything that won't come out with this. That looks good, then just a quick polish. And this is now annoyingly where I need to start wearing gloves for everything, because we don't want my big ugly fingerprints when we give this to the customer. Shiny. So we're going to clean up these fittings, and to do that I have this, which is an ultrasonic cleaner, and that should just get all the gunk out the inside. We've had some just tap water running through here, so while they're not too bad, they are not super clean inside. Might be a bit of lime scale. So this should just remove anything that's stuck to the surface of the brass. Then we will assemble these fittings and get the block mounted. So I'm going to fill this up with distilled water. So that's on now, and if I lower this in, there's not like clouds of stuff coming off it, which is a good thing. It means it wasn't super dirty to start with. These ones I think will have a bit more dirt in them. There you go, you can see it coming off there. Yeah, look at that. Oh, this thing is so cool. I'll just leave that to run for a bit. So we've had those in there for 3 minutes. Oh, they look perfect. Yeah, super clean. That's quite impressive. It's the first time I've used this. It works great. Yeah, the water's definitely a bit cloudy and green now. So now we're just going to rebuild these fixings before attaching them to the block. And we've got this silicone lubricant spray, which is what we apply to the O-rings on the inside. You may have noticed, people who know about silicone, that we have silicone O-rings on the outside, and silicone lube dissolves silicone O-rings. But on the inside we have nitrile O-rings for this exact reason. So we can lubricate these two, and then we don't need any lubricating spray on the external O-rings. So I just spray this through here, like that. It's got a nice layer on the inside now. There we go. And once this little groove clears those two internal O-rings, it's beautifully smooth. And then they just get held on using these little stainless clips. There we go. Now that's an assembled fitting. Give it a little waggle around just to spread the lube around. Then we just need to clean out the grooves that the external silicone O-rings sit in, so that we don't have silicone on silicone. And then, there we go. Then we are going to attach these back to the block. Awesome. Now we need to mount the block to the CPU. And I've got my Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut paste. And we're going to go for the blob method. And then we just lower this down, trying to keep it flat so the paste spreads evenly. I'm just checking all the standoffs are the same distance from the top of the block, because that just means it's sitting flat, which it is. So then we just bolt it in place. And then I'm just going to keep pressure in the middle while I tighten everything. And it's mounted. So what's next? I think the pump next. And here is our pump top. We've got quite a bit of limescale, and it's gone a bit green in there. That's not verdigris like you get on copper. I think that's just limescale from the hard water mixed with a bit of the patina from the brass. But hopefully this will all come off in the cleaner. Let's give it a go. Yeah, it's definitely got all the little chunky bits off. I'm just going to give it a quick scrub with a toothbrush, just to loosen anything kind of physical, and then we'll pop it back in. So that's had about 5 minutes in total. Looks perfect to me. Remember, the discoloration is not going to be cleaned off, and it doesn't do any harm whatsoever. Feels perfectly smooth still. Cool, I'm going to go dry this off and then we'll give it a final polish. And we want the wire to go the same direction as the pipes when it's installed, so we want it to go this way round. So to install our pump, you've got these two screws that go in here, and that just sits in those little grooves. Then this just bolts in here. I'm just going to give this a quick finish on the polishing wheel along with the screws. So that's what it looks like before and after. And can we align the screws? Hell yeah, we can. So the next thing to go into the case is going to be the wiring and the plumbing, because they kind of need to be installed at the same time, because some pipes need to go on top of the wires and some of the wires need to go on top of the pipes. But before we start doing that, obviously these look a bit of a mess now, so we need to take off all the fittings, clean those, and then clean the pipes and polish the pipes. So they're looking pretty messy. I'm just going to strip these down, take the O-rings off, and then we will put them in the ultrasonic cleaner. So these are all stripped down, and yeah, the tap water here really isn't good. You can see the amount of lime scale that's on there. Note to self, do not use tap water to fill a system and then leave it to dry for 2 months. Right, let's just put them all in at once. I haven't disassembled the fittings. I don't think I'll need to. We can lubricate them while they're assembled. So if all goes well, there should be a big cloud of dust that comes off these. So that was 3 minutes, and it looks like quite a lot of gunk has come off. I'm going to just clean up the surfaces on the polishing wheel, and then I'm going to put them back in just to clean off any dust from the polishing. So now we're just going to lube these up. Super smooth. These are going to be marginally more difficult. I'm just going to cover them, then we'll clean any excess off afterwards. It should seep through the gap. Alright, they're all nice and smooth now. So I'm going to clean them up, add the O-rings. You don't need to watch me do that. So the next thing you're going to see is cleaning the pipes. And even though I polished these all before, I have done a couple of tweaks off camera. A couple of the angles just needed a fraction of a millimeter twisting round in some of the joins. So the solder is no longer neat in certain places. So I'm just going to re-sand all the solder off, and then I'll run it on the polishing wheel and then give it a hand polish. I love sanding. So everything is back to a nice pink copper colour, and I just need to make them shiny now. So everything is polished. We need to clean these now, and I'm aware that's going to get water on the surface, which might discolour it again. But we've done the bulk of the polishing. We've smoothed it all down with the polishing compound. So if we do need to polish off any water spots, then that's going to be a much easier job. But I wanted to do the cleaning after the polishing, because there's going to be polishing compound in all these gaps and stuff. So this should get that out nicely. Hopefully this will look quite cool. There's a lot coming out of here, isn't there? Wow. Well, that looks disgusting. I'm going to empty this out, put some fresh water in, and do it again with these same parts until the water stays clear. I think one more flush. Yeah, that's looking clean now. Then we need to do the same for the bigger pipes, but they're not going to fit in here. So I think we're just going to have to kind of lower them in half at a time. Pretty good. So that is all the pipes clean. We were unable to get the long sections of this one properly submerged into the cleaner, but they will be cleaned well enough when we flush everything through with distilled water just before filling it with the coolant. So this is everything that's left to go in the build, and it's just going to be a case of now attaching these all to here. So I'm going to do that. So it was all going well until I tried to attach this little joiner piece to these two radiators here. And it's too short. And this fit before, so I think what I've done is I have put the radiators the opposite way up to how they were on the test build. And there's a bit of variation in where they put their ports, and the result is that this needs to be 1mm longer. Now I could undo everything, swap the radiators over, and that should solve the problem. However, I think I'm actually just going to heat this up and desolder it slightly and just stretch it by 1mm. So I think I can do that in about 10 minutes, whereas redoing everything will take about half an hour. And my technique here is to get some parts of some other fittings, screw them in like that. Then I'm going to heat up here and waggle these apart. And I'm going to wrap some wet fabric around here, partly to stop it getting immediately too hot for me to hold, and partly to protect these solder joints. I do not recommend doing this at home. This is not best practice, but I've done it before and I think it will work. So I think we've gained 1mm there. Just don't want to add any twist to it, which I think we have. So yeah, we have twisted this. This leg is now up a bit further, so I'm going to reheat it and then just flatten it with a block of wood. So obviously we need to check it's still airtight. Yep. So it's back on. We're making good progress. We've got most of the pipes on. And this one will just squish all this stuff. We've got our power supply with everything plugged into there. So the last bit of the plumbing is going on with the radiator attached. And we need to plug this fan connector in. And this is why the wiring loom is so good, because the fan connector is just sitting there ready. So I think we should have an airtight loop now. I'm just going to test that. Right, I'm going to leave that for about 5 minutes. So we're currently at exactly 12.5 psi. Let's see what happens. Right, where are we at? Hasn't moved at all. Yes! So all we got left to do now is the graphics card. So the customer supplied this 4090 and my understanding is they've used it for a little bit in another build. So let's see if I can remember how to take one of these apart. There's a little latch here. Hey, cool. So now I think it should be free. It's just kind of stuck down with thermal paste and thermal pads. So I just need to very carefully pry it away. Oh, there we go. It's a little bit scary. There is our 4090. Disassemble 4090. Done. I'm just going to reassemble this as best I can without the PCB in, just so we can give that back to the customer since it is all theirs. And there is a complete 4090 with nothing inside it. So we can keep that safe. And now we're going to install the 4090 onto the block. So we need to take off these old thermal pads first. Then I'm just going to clean the VRAM with some isopropyl alcohol. I've already done that for the chip in the middle. And now this is our set of thermal pads that we supply with the monoblock. So we just need to, one at a time, place them onto the card. And that is it for the front. So now we're going to go over to the block. And first we're going to insert our 4 alignment tools. And we're going to place these 4 thicker washers over that. Then we need to thermal paste the GPU die. And then in one fluid movement, I need to lower this onto the pins without any of the thermal pads falling off, which is usually not too difficult the first time. Just going to push them down a little bit. It's when you reuse the pads, then they kind of lose their stickiness, and then this can be a bit of a pain, but let's go. Nice. Okay, then it's the rear thermal pads. Then we've got our 4 remaining washers. And they should kind of tuck inside these little plastic bits that are already on the PCB. Oh yeah. Then one at a time, just to not dislodge anything, we are going to remove the alignment tool and replace it with the screw. And it's in, and this should tighten to a fairly hard stop. But we are squishing 2 layers of thermal pads as we do this, so I'm not going to go too fast. I'm going to tighten a little bit, let the pads kind of spread out, and then tighten a bit more. So we're all set to fill our loop. We've got our PC, obviously, we have our in pipe, we have our out pipe. We've got this car battery, which I just took out my car. And the reason for that is that we need to turn the pump on separately to bleed the loop before we turn on the whole PC. So we've got the pump wire coming out the back here, which is then wired up. I've got the 12 volt positive input connected to the positive terminal on the car battery, and then when I join the negative terminal to the negative side of the car battery, that will turn the pump on independently of the whole PC. We've got a load of distilled water here, that's what's in this jar here. We've got a spare jug just in case things go wrong, and then we have our Corsair Hydro X clear coolant for once it's flushed, but we're going to be flushing it for a while with distilled water, just because as well as we cleaned it, there's still going to be some kind of stuff in the loop which we don't want in there. So I've got this tap section here, which you may remember from one of the previous episodes. That is in its closed position, so there's no way for water to get from here to here. That means by me breathing in through this tube, that's going to suck water up this pipe, that's going to fill the loop, and most importantly the pump. And then once it starts coming out here, we're going to turn the pump on and then put this in here, and then that's just going to be flushing everything through with distilled water. And we'll probably do that until this gets dirty, and then do it a few more times. But let's do it. So there should be water in the pump now. The pipes are cold, they feel like there's water in there. There's obviously a lot of pipes and radiators and stuff, so it's not going to flow super smoothly through, but now there is no air coming out of here. So we should be able to submerge that and activate the pump. Going a bit slow, but there's going to be a lot of bubbles in there for it to be pushing through. There we go, it's picking up speed now. It's getting quieter. The noise you'll hear from the pump is water with lots of small air bubbles in, so when it goes quiet, that means it's just pure water in there. It's working. Let's just check the pressure. Yeah, see, there's a lot of pressure there. Exciting. This part of it worked at least. I can hear a lot of gurgling coming from the radiators, which is a good thing. You can see here the water going in is nice and clean. The water coming out has lots of little bubbles. So all those bubbles are bits of air we don't want in there. So just to speed things along, I'm going to rotate the PC around a bit and just get some of those air bubbles that are sitting like in the top of the radiator, that I'll just get some of them into the pipes, which will bring a lot more of the air out. But because I don't want water to go everywhere, I'm just going to tape these onto here. I'll just hold them safely. So as I do this, probably a lot more air will suddenly come out of here. Oh, it's heavy. Yeah, there's a lot more coming out. And the water is honestly looking pretty clean. There's some bits in it, definitely. And that's why we're doing this. But it's not discoloured at all. I think all that ultrasonic cleaning definitely helped to speed up this process. And no leaks still. So I'm going to go have a cup of tea for 20 minutes and just let this continue to do its thing. So that's been about 20 minutes. The bubbles seem to have stopped. So before we swap the water and do it all again, I'm just going to turn the pump off and then on a couple of times, just because that water flow stopping and then starting again can free some more bubbles. And then I'm going to empty this water out and fill it up and go again. This is really a job that you want 2 people for. Get these right back under there. And then we're going to put the pump back on. And we'll give it another little wobble. Yeah, we're getting some more bubbles coming out there. So with it on its end like this, all the air is going to be pushed to this end, which is all going to then be filling up this end of the radiators. So I think when I put it back down, we're going to see another big stream of air bubbles come out. Yeah, there you go, look at that. And then we'll go that end. But it's getting to the point now that whichever way we turn it, the pump doesn't make any noise. And that's what we want. And on the inside of the pipes, there might be various tiny little bubbles just sticking to the surface. So I'm just going to tap the pipes, which might release some of those bubbles, if there are any. So that's been another 10 or 15 minutes, and everything's running quietly. So I think we're ready to fill it with coolant. So I'm going to disconnect the pump. Again, this is going to be quite tricky with only one of me. So now the plan is to swap all the distilled water that's in here for coolant without letting any air in. So we could drain all the water out, then do all this again with coolant. But this coolant is 89% distilled water. So if we have a bit of distilled water left over, it's not going to be a problem at all. I'm going to fill this up with coolant. Then I'm going to turn the pump on, and the coolant is going to displace the water. The water will end up in there, as will a bit of the coolant. And then we'll put the exit pipe back in here once the coolant starts coming out. And we only want the inlet pipe in the coolant for now. And what I should have done is marked on this jar how much fills up the system. So I think I'm going to waste a bit of coolant by doing it this way. But I'm now going to connect the battery again. That's going to pump the coolant in, replace the water, and then once most of this has gone through, I'm going to turn it off and then refill it from the coolant, if that makes sense. I actually did it by the smell. Once I could smell the coolant in here, then there's coolant coming out. Then this goes back in here, and we can then turn the pump back on, and then we have only coolant going through. Nice. And again, we'll just let that run for a few minutes. Pressure's still good. So I haven't seen a bubble come out in another 5 minutes. So now it's going to be maybe the trickiest part. I now need to open up this tap again, ideally while it's running, with these 2 pipes connected. This needs to be on its back. I really should have got longer hoses here. Hopefully this will work. So can I get this screwdriver back through? Yes. So I'm going to start opening the tap now. So that tap is now fully open, which means the pump doesn't need any of the water to be coming through from these 2. and it's kind of just running by itself now. So I need to swap these two fittings for these plugs. But they're obviously still full of water, so I'm just going to give it a minute because we've got a few more bubbles coming out. Just the area around the tap, there was probably some air in there. But you can see the bubbles are now just sitting here. They're not being forced through because the water is coming from the PC rather than through this jar. Okay, I think we're good. So I'm going to turn the pump off, and I want to make these two fittings the highest points so that water doesn't pour out of them when I take the fittings off. And I'm just going to drain the water out of these hoses. Oh, that was easy. And yeah, we've probably got a bit of air in here, but there's always going to be a bit of air in there when we don't have a reservoir in the system. And that's not a problem. It might actually help us because when water heats up, it expands. So having some air in there, which can be compressed by the expanding water, is better than having it fully topped off with water. And then there's a slight risk of, if it's full of water and then it gets hot, that it might expand and pop one of the joins. But people seem to think this is a big risk, but there's no record of it ever happening to anyone. So because these are going to be wet when I open them up, I'm just going to pad everywhere I can with tissue just to catch any water, especially since it's right next to our 4090. So then we're just going to unscrew these. There's a bit of water coming out, but it is topped up right to the top, which is good. And then I'm just going to turn the pump back on and just check everything sounds all right. Yeah, a bit of a noise from the pump because the place where the air is going to have come in goes fairly quickly to the pump. But all that air should eventually settle in the radiator, where there's a lot more space for it to kind of settle without getting agitated and churned up into foam and then sent back around the system. It's done. All we need to do is turn it on now. It's actually not quite done. I haven't done the pads for the feet. So we've got some nice little cork bases, and then on here we've left a gap where you need to access the screw to take the bottom panel off. And now it is done. So we're going to leave it there for today, guys. I think the video is long enough. I know I said this would be the last episode, but I think we'll do one kind of follow-up episode just with some stress testing and thermals and stuff like that. It's done, but the customer can't collect it for a couple of weeks, so we've got a couple of weeks to play with it. So if you want to see us do anything in particular with it, let us know. We might also do like a Q&A in that same episode. So if you've got any questions, just drop them in the comments. Questions about this build, questions about Billet Labs, or anything. We can try and answer as many of your questions as possible. Thank you so much for following so far and for seeing this ridiculous thing take shape. I'm super pleased with it. I think it looks awesome, and we will see how it works in the next episode. Take care, guys. Bye. Nothing left to do but press the button. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh my God, it works.